So today, what do we got on the schedule? We want to talk a little bit about speed.
Yeah. So this is actually something that I found most applicable to myself. I feel like in the beginning, you go, 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 as many questions as possible, do as much as possible. But once, say, you're in the high 160s, low 170s, then it's really like slow and deliberate, and it's kind of a mindset shift. So I'd be interested to hear about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, for sure. I think the first, uh, let's call it 10 points, comes pretty readily to most people.
Yeah.
Like, usually once you get somewhere around 10 points, sometimes it's seven, sometimes it's 13 or 14, but somewhere in that range. For most people, that they find it like just doing quantity, just getting more exposure, starting to put the patterns together that they're seeing from doing all the different material, that they'll get that quick jump. And then at some point you feel like you hit something a little more solid, and
Yeah.
that the points aren't coming quite as readily. So I think it's a pretty common thing for people to then slow down and then dive deep. And that's also a good diagnostic process too. Like, some of the stuff's going to come natural, some of the stuff's not going to come naturally. So if you kind of take that beginning portion of your studying to like absorb as much as you can and just kind of be in it as much as you can, you'll see that the stuff that makes sense will make sense, and the stuff that doesn't won't. And then you'll be able to dive deeper and then like really put in the hard work on the stuff that is a little more challenging for you.
Yeah, I definitely want to piggyback off what you said about the when you first start, it's kind of, maybe everything is so novel, right? So some things are just going to click. It's, say you start running, you start doing something in the gym, whatever it is that you start doing, you're going to very quickly just pick up things that make sense to you and other things not. But then realizing that it's step by step, like different parts of the journey, right? Where once you start hitting that wall, it's like, oh, am I adjusting? I feel like, I definitely saw for myself. I'd be curious to see how your experience was, but I think when I first sat in on, it was some free call, analyzing a question. I was kind of amazed at how much time was just spent in, really getting granular and every
Yeah.
single word and extrapolating and kind of like the branches, right? Like, oh, what if we
Yeah.
change this? What's like the implication of this one word here, and then for the answer choices, just so much time on one thing. And I think at that time I thought, oh, this isn't a good use of my time. But then, as I started to become more advanced, I was like, oh, now I see my studying is becoming a lot more granular, where I'm really paying attention to the scenery and the rocks. Whereas before, I'd be outside and, I everything is new. I don't really know what's happening. I'm just walking.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I was just recording some um, explanations for TikTok in short form, and I'm just like, it is so hard for me to go through an LSAT question in 90 seconds. I mean, they ended
Yeah,
up being like 5 minutes of me talking as fast as I can possibly talk of
yeah,
all the things I'm thinking. Oh, here's a study.
yeah,
When I see studies, I think of these 10 things, and they're like webbed up over here. And here's a correlation to causation, and here's some of the things that I'm thinking over here, and here's how they're going to connect to each other. Maybe here's the question type. Here's all the things that start to flood into my mind for this. And it's just, it takes a real deep dive on a lot of questions for you to get to be that like automatic of like when certain things show up. Even the phrase like tends to, like the phrase tends to showed up, and I was like, oh, okay. It's not all the time. It's not. It is some of the time, but it is also most of the time, right? So tends to
yes,
is going to be the most.
usually
So
more often.
like knowing that just intuitively, and also that this is like a point at which they can like start to mess with you in the answer choices,
Yeah,
where they like will drive that up to always, or they'll change the certainty of it, and just like capturing every little thing that's happening as it's happening, and then like letting all the things that are connected to it kind of like uh, come to the forefront of your mind, so that you're like aware of the particular scenery that you're in
yeah.
on that question.
I I think also it's a really good time to kind of analyze how everything is, right? Because I feel like as with this and many other things, tennis, etc., cooking, sometimes you pick up bad habits along the way where, when you're starting, you know, things are still getting done. I'm still, that recipe kind of comes through, but as you get more advanced, um, in reaching that plateau, I think this is a good opportunity to look and say, like, have I built good habits? Or I tend to do this, but um, I think it really does seem counterintuitive, right? Because maybe with studying, just go, go, go. I want to run as fast as possible. I want to look as much as possible, but then the quality isn't there, right? So just, quantity and quality are things to be very mindful of. And, I think sometimes working with students, it's like, oh, wow, we actually didn't look at too many questions, but I feel like I've absorbed so much. And, that's surprising to them. But it's like, oh, yeah, once you reach a certain point, the battles are very, very granular. And then, it'll affect everything else, right? So you can check up on your form and pay attention to the little things along the scenery.
Yeah, I would venture to say, and this is just going to be shooting from the hip, but if you really deeply, fully, with no error, with full clarity, understood about 50 logical reasoning LSAT questions, you might be able to be perfect on the exam throughout the entirety of the test. If you really deeply understood every single concept that's at play and everything that's happening in 50 different LSAT questions, I think you may be prepared to take on the entirety of the test and get a perfect score. So if it takes you a day to go over a question, 50 days, if you master it, like a whole day on just one question, which I wouldn't recommend doing, but like it gets to the point of like that deep quality is going to give you something that the surface interaction just won't. You have to do thousands of questions on the surface interaction to maybe never get there.
So two things I'll say to that, John. So one, I was reminded of um, I'm pretty sure it was Bruce Lee that said it, but there's a quote along the lines of, he said something along the lines of, I fear not the man who has 1,000 techniques, but the man who has practiced one technique 1,000 times, right? Where it's through it's the extreme, like, it seems so extreme, but, I have heard people say podcasts, TikToks, Instagram, etc. There are a lot of, LSAT, people participating in this space that say, hey, if you're on a deserted island and, you just take one practice test and you really just really get granular, understand the nuances behind it, plug and play with the little components and see, all the little things are at play. And with the wrong answers, just, really just getting in the bushes, right? Then exactly like you're saying, right? Then, you'd be surprised. You don't need to do a million things, but if you're very, very granular, you can actually extract. There's a lot more to extract than one would expect. I would say, keep practicing the technique multiple times.
Yeah, and I think that's a universal truth, that there's so much more to extract. Like the better our microscopes get, the more and more we can extract from, the deeper and deeper we can see into things. And we thought atoms at one point were the smallest possible things, and we went deeper and deeper and deeper. And they're like, there's just so much more than we could ever imagine. And then you split an atom, and all sorts of hell breaks loose, and bombs are going off. And, so like it's just like it's unimaginable what you can get out of like a very small amount of content and questions that you go over.
And I think what's interesting about this is it doesn't just apply to, I feel like in talking about this or reading about this, sometimes people think, oh, okay, I can definitely see that being the case for like LR, but not art, or vice versa. But this is something that applies to both sections. Even when games was around, just there's a lot more to extract than you would expect. And I think also by spending a little bit more time and playing around with the world that they've given you, I think it really has helped me, and I think working with students, kind of
Yeah.
have good pattern recognition where there's a toolbox of things so that this particular really going in depth to this question actually reminds you of something else, and you can compare and add to your toolbox of the different worlds that you're participating in. So I think there's another positive for kind of slow, really squeezing everything you can out of certain questions.
Yeah, and it's amazing, like, to me, even something like construction, within the construction field, within a 16th of an inch is considered like within reasonable bounds. Have you ever tried to cut something within a 16th of an inch? Like, the first time you try, like, it's not actually that easy to do, but these guys who are doing it done it 1,000 times. They can rip it and go. But when I've done it, I'm like off by a quarter inch, a half an inch. Maybe I'm just sloppy with it. But I found like the more I do it, then like the more like precision I'm giving to it. The more I'm like you just see things so much more deeply and more precisely and more accurately the more time you spend with it.
Yeah. I think also it just seems so counterintuitive, but I almost like it when we don't go over too many things, because I think sometimes and we've talked so much about this, but there's a lot of fluff studying, kind of just going through the pages, go 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 go, and or even you're working with a student, you're working with someone, you read a passage, and it's like, oh, so what are your thoughts on that? And hold on a second, I'm going to go back, so they're really kind of slow, and then you can start to anticipate, and sometimes because you've worked with so many of these and paid so, I guess, close attention, it's almost like you can anticipate, like, all right, you said that, I already know exactly what you're going to ask me, or like I see the game that you set up for me, right? And I think it's it just becomes a lot more valuable, right? It's not just it's all these things are connected, right? They're all part of this bigger body that they're drawing from, right? And it's just it's the same thing, but just dressed a little bit differently. But that's something that I just came to mind.
Yeah, and that anticipation too. Like, a lot of people aren't anticipating anything to happen. So like, I was reading Nancy Drew with my daughter last night, and she loves these Nancy Drew books. And she's so into them. And they brought in this new character, and they told us about this super rare doll that exists in the world. And this girl's having a party. So it's this Hollywood girl doll, and this girl's having this party, and everyone's bringing their dolls, and they don't know why they're bringing their dolls to the party. And then they show up, and there's all these cardboard cutouts of Hollywood stars. And I'm like, what do you think they're setting up here for us? Like, what kind of setup is this? She's like, I bet that she got that Hollywood doll. And then we get there, and of course she has the Hollywood doll. So it's the same thing. Like, when the LSAT says a recent study suggests that, like, they're setting you up. Like, you should know.
I know. Yeah, I've been here too many times before, Yeah. Fool me once. Yeah. But
there's a reason they're sneaking that little thing.
Yeah. And then also, if we talked about like tends to, or just like the hardness and softness of language. These are all worlds that we've already participated in, and right, and just being able to hone it exactly. Yeah, that Nancy Drew example. You step in, and it's like, I already know what game you guys are playing, right? And sometimes they switch it up on you, but you're already on guard, right? And then maybe, a question will, or one of the answer choices will call to mind another world. It's like, whoa. I see how, in my pattern toolbox, this is like a slight variation in the degree of certainty I need to have, or, percentages. And, so I think that anticipatory nature, very important. And that's just one of the things that comes out of this.
Yes, for sure. And like, to me as an adult reading the book, I'm like, I know where this is going, but she wasn't really thinking ahead of it yet until I paused and said, hey, what do you think's what's going on here? Like, this is going on and this is going on. And then you could see it just click, like, oh, but she was just immersed in the story, not really thinking ahead of where it should go. And that's how a lot of LSAT takers are. They're just like, all right, I'm reading
Yeah.
this information. It's just
Yeah.
information. But instead we're
Yeah.
like, oh man, like there's this trap here. They're setting me up over here. They're going to catch a lot of people with this right here, but not
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
You've seen that
Yeah.
before. And then like you get to the answer choice and you see, oh yeah, here's that answer choice that plays off of that thing, right? It says the
Yeah.
only in the answer choice, and it said tends to in the stimulus.
Yeah.
I saw that
Yeah.
coming. All right, I'm moving on. And you're just shrugging off everything as it's coming at you until you get to the right answer choice.
You know what it kind of reminded me of? What you just said is what I've seen with a lot of people I worked with. It's, a lot of us are just in the dark, right? And each time, it's, you've been here before, but the lights are off, you're
Right.
reading, and the test is taking you for like, on like, you're in the boxing ring, right? And you're just getting knocked around. Yeah, it's you are being led rather than leading, right? Because I think when there is, when you do reach a certain level, you kind of you're navigating and you're synthesizing the information, right? For example, in RCI, I always tell students, I always want you to think, why are they telling me this? And after you say, you read a paragraph or two, are they gonna like, did the author actually state their opinion, or in doing that setup, do you think they're going to start disagreeing? How do the components just all kind of play along, right? Like, I want you to, as you're reading, have like a main takeaway for this part, a main takeaway for that part, and then you're kind of threading, the lights are on as you're moving,
Yeah.
and sometimes they still get us by surprise, but you're
Sure.
synthesizing, you're actively engaging. So it just leads for a little bit more of a pleasant, you can defend yourself in the boxing ring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for sure. And even on reading, so like on logical reasoning, you're really thinking like, what are the test writers trying to do here to make? On reading comprehension, I think there's like two levels of thinking. It's like, what is the author of this passage doing? Because the author who wrote this wrote it for a different purpose than the LSAT has put it into commission for, right? So like, what's the author doing here? And then what are the test writers doing what are they doing throughout this passage?
That they chose.
Why is that there for them? Why did they choose this passage? Why are they in? Why was this particular part of this particular passage something that they thought was interesting, or had enough testable material in it to then create the questions that they're going to create? So you've got like this, like you're paying attention to two different sets of like motives: the author's motive, the test writer's motive, and then you're kind of like putting those together as you're like anticipating what the questions are going to be, and then what are the correct answer choices based on what was stated.
And one thing, John, that I was thinking about is I've had a lot of people tell me, okay, John, this is all lovely and it all makes sense, but it takes me so long. And I try to tell them, like, honestly, it seems like it doesn't make sense, but by going slow, speed will come naturally, right? You start slow, you make sure you're not tripping, you're making sure that your form is good, and then speed will just come, right? You're being very intentional, and you're very aware of these things that otherwise might have just blown past you, right? And I've told this to students before, but it's a little bit funny. I think that analog of going slow to go fast extends in so many different areas. I know I've talked about running a lot, but that's another huge misconception with running, where you have these people getting crazy times, and you ask them, oh, you must be going 100 miles per hour all the time. And they're like, no, I go 2-3 minutes, I go way slower, and and it's that foundation that allows me to go very, very fast. So I think that's like to justify, to encourage this kind of slower study, this more granular, and hey, if you one session you just look at 3 questions, that's fine, but I want you to really look at them carefully.
Yeah, and there's got to be some sort of psychological bias that's listed, but I don't know what the name of it is, where you see someone in their current state and assume that that's just how they've always been too. Like you see someone on a moto bike hitting like a 50-foot jump, and you're like, whoa, that person just is able to do that. Like, but you didn't see the years and years and years of them going slow, hitting tiny jumps, and then a little bit bigger.
The 1 foot jump. Yeah.
And just like, and you just assume that people can just like get on a motorbike and just do that, but nobody can. Like those people took years and years and years of practice. So like for the LSAT, you're just going to take months and months of practice to get to where you want to be. But like it has to start with the fundamentals and going very slow. Like they didn't even know how to think about this. The guy who does that jump didn't even know how to work a clutch at some point. Like he had no clue how to even rev a motorbike, how they worked, like any aspect of it, no clue. They had to learn every single step of that to get to where they are. And you're just at the beginning stages. Just nobody documents the beginning stages of a journey because they're not sure they're going to be successful. You know,
the pain. Yeah.
Right. And yeah, it's terrible. Like, and the broken bones and the wanting to give up and taking a year off.
The black eye. Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
It's not until you have kids that you get to really watch human beings learn stuff, and you just how sloppy of a deal it is to figure out. You know what I mean? So it's really interesting.
And you know, one thing that just immediately came, forefront of, as you were saying that, just kind of hit me like a brick wall was so much of this also, and we've talked about this before, it sounds cheesy, sounds like airy, fluffy, but so much of this is based around perspective and mindset and expectations, right? Because, we've seen it, we've been there, everyone, they, New Year's resolutions, let's go to the gym. I expect to lose like 30 pounds in 1 month. It's like, whoa. Like we'll start with one pound, like 2 weeks, So I think, you see so many students where it's, they're just beginning and they're like, okay, like 178. And it's like, oh, before 178, let's go 160, like piecemeal, right? Because I think that mindset to take on too much all at once is really harmful, right? Because then that really encourages this kind of the sloppy and the fluff studying where, I'm just going to like, go through practice tests and go question, and it's like, oh, what? So what was the answer to the previous question that we just talked about? Or, what was the main takeaway there? And, it's like, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And it's, it just sounds so cheesy, but just being mindful of the expectations and mindset can lend itself to, engaging in this kind of studying. Like, hey, let's go a little bit slower. That's perfectly okay. Being mindful of like, oh, okay, I'm working with this person and, they're obviously very comfortable. I didn't see them in the pain cave, so all these like perspective is very important. Yeah.
For sure. And everyone has to go into the pain cave at some times, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And also like matching the technique that you're trying to do to the score that you're trying to get, I think is important. So you had mentioned like cooking as an analogy earlier. My wife and I just took a cooking class on Saturday, and the chef who was teaching the class saw my knife skills and he was like, this is not. And so like, you got to curl the thing and and I was like, dude, I don't care that much about it. Like, I'm not trying to work in a professional kitchen. Like, I like to cook at home. I like to do these things. I can take my time with it. So like my expectations of where I'm not trying to be top 1% chef in the world. But if you're shooting for a 178, you're trying to be top 1% LSAT taker in the world. So you better learn the little curled hand and the exactly how to hold the knife, the exact
the wrist,
the wrist, everything. You're gonna have every little piece of that if that's where you want to go. Now, if you don't want to go that high, there may be certain techniques that maybe you don't need to go all the way into and refine perfectly. But just know that if you do want to get there, there's going to be a lot of strain of trying to figure out how to master these techniques, especially like conditional reasoning. Like there's a whole thing you have to go through to master conditional reasoning where you have to diagram it out, and then you have to learn how to then diagram less, and then so like you're adding in all this stuff that you're just going to take away later. Like that seems unnecessary. But but sometimes you got to go through the paces.
And I feel like that's something that people don't like to hear, John, but I think, I don't know, looking at forums or, study, like, and sometimes it seems to be the case that those people that don't set the ceiling, they don't want to work in that 3-star Michelin restaurant, right? And it's almost like their studying is, by not having that huge expectation, it kind of lends itself to easier studying. And say they meet their expectation, right? Say in your cooking example, it's like, okay, I'm pretty confident in the kitchen, right? And then if you want to take it to the next level, hey, you gave yourself a little bit of peace of mind to getting where you wanted to go.
Sure.
Maybe some people only need this score for like where they're looking for, or but once they get there, it's like, okay, I'm going to try more, but you let yourself get there with a little bit more ease. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. I've definitely had some students where they're like, hey, I just want to get 160 plus, and then they get there and they're like, oh, I
think I can do more.
Getting the hang of this. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, let's, like, you can do it. You like, should you want to study more? Like, let's go there. But unpopular opinion, but I think that all ties into mindset and is helpful, I think.
Yeah. And probably, hopefully we check in a few years and my knife skills have gotten better once I kind of master some of the other areas. And I feel like I can take it on.
What were you guys cooking this weekend?
We were cooking dishes from the Amalfi Coast, from Italy, so Italian dishes. So when I was chopping, I think maybe a red onion or something like that, and he was like, the pieces are all different sizes, everything's like, but now that I'm that class, maybe now I'm ready to like take on that next challenge and be like, what, man, that is a doable thing. Other people have done it. Yeah. I can start to do it. And if I practice it, I think I'll get there. So the same goes for the LSAT, I think.
Yeah. Last little silly example, really just to drive this point home. John, I don't know if, maybe some of the listeners, golf is very trendy now. So I saw my friends recently, I was trying to play golf. Absolute nightmare. No idea what I'm like, oh, my back, what in the, I have nightmare. But rather than, trying to copy the former varsity players or college players, the friends I was with, I was like, hey, just baby steps, like half swing,
nice and smooth.
Again, just, I'm just, let me aim for like 160, like, oh, I'm here, okay, I'll take it to the next level. But it just makes it so much easier to digest, right? Than all these other things at once, but then you haven't even gotten your footing, and it's, golf is something else, John.
Sure is. Take the lifetime to master.
But once I did, baby, like piecewise funk, like, took it piece by piece, I actually, I kind of, the progress went a lot better than when I was trying to juggle everything.
Oh yeah, and if you're trying to muscle it and just slam the ball every time, good luck improving your swing. It's
sweaty.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
all right, JP. Well, I think that's great. I think we've given some people some tips. Take your time, learn this stuff, set a reasonable goal, work on your pacing. It's going to come naturally as you master the material better. Any parting words?
I think that's, I'm still nightmares from golf. Yeah, I think that's great. Thank you, John.
And if you want to play golf, probably go to the driving range a couple times before you go out there. It does help.
Yeah, the pain cave.
Absolutely. Go into the pain cave. Yeah, that's what the driving range is. All right. Well, thanks, JP. We'll talk soon.
Yeah. Thank you, John. See you.
Bye, everybody.